All right. I'm going to bounce around tabs a little bit here, but it should be fine. So this is a project that was done by Roxana, myself, Miguel, and Dan. Essentially, it takes a e-commerce product description and looks at reviews of the product and rewrites the description to get a better description. And I'll come back to, this is the front end driver for it, which I'll come back to. Here is our diagram of how this works. So there's a bunch of front end processing, which is in a Jupyter notebook. Essentially, the customer talks to website product description. There's product reviews and product ratings. We consolidate those together and we feed them into a generation agent. The generation agent does sentiment analysis on those reviews. It also reduces the original product description to a product spec, which the evaluator will use, and I'll explain that in a second, and then generates a new product description. So then that product description is handed off to another agent called the evaluation agent, and that will look at the grammar, like the English usage and how effective that is, how well the new product description covers the product spec that was produced, and finally, what's the tone of the new one versus the tone of the old one? So it does a comparison of the original description and the generated one. And then it will suggest changes to be made by the generation agent, and then generation agent will make the changes accordingly and put that back out to, that ends up back out on the website. So so that's how the overall design works. We simulate the website, so I'll show you what the front end driver looks like now. This is just a Jupyter notebook. The first part of this is just the processing. We pull in a file that has the initial description, and then we pull in the reviews. The actual data set came from Kaggle. So the product description we pulled off of Amazon. The set of reviews and the ratings came from this data set in Kaggle. So this first cell is processing that data set and creating a JSON. I'm going to show you some outputs first, and then I'll run it for real, and hopefully it'll perform the way it's supposed to. But with the regular outputs, or with the current outputs, it is. So this is the initial product description. This is for a Kindle. We don't really have to go into the details of it too much, but it talks about all the tech stuff for it. And then there's 20 reviews here. And they have a rating and a review. Now, the other thing to note here is the original data set had close to 35,000 reviews. So that's a bit much to feed into an LLM. So we're just feeding in 20 right now, and I'll talk about that, considerations for that a bit later. So then we use a no-code agent system, which I'm going to show you in a second, called Flowise. And so this next block just calls Flowise, and within Flowise we built the agents, and I'll show you those in a second. But what gets fed out is this new product description. And so the product description is here, and towards the end of it you can see there is an average rating, 4.65, and what's the best review, and this review is like how much this person's child loves their new Kindle. There's a little bit of stuff in here about the conversation between the agents that came out, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So I'm going to set this off just to run real quickly, and I'll let it run in the background. And we'll actually see if it does what it's supposed to do, because sometimes it doesn't, which I probably and probably shouldn't tell you that, but we're all friends here. So this is FlowWise. So FlowWise is no code, as I mentioned, and what you do is you set up your workers. So we have the generation agent here, and then the evaluation agent here. Now, FlowWise, this whole agent framework is in beta for them, and the only architecture they have right now is this supervisor that supervises 2 workers. So this is different from our diagram a little bit because it has the supervisor in here, but it controls the 2 workers. Now, the supervisor and the 2 workers use ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo as their LLM. The actual evaluator uses 4.0. And so this was based on a paper that I had found where people had successfully used 4.0 as an evaluator against outputs from 3.5. And the actual use case was a little bit different. It was more on Q&A kind of things, but we figured I'd try it out here. So the way these things work is inside is where you put the prompt information. And so in the supervisor here, it enumerate what are the things you have to do. And to make this work the way you really want, you have to be very specific. The generation agent is very similar as well. Like I really have to nail this thing down to make sure it does what I want it to do. Now, it turns out the evaluation agent, sorry, user. There we go. It's very simple. So that was very easy. I could just describe what I wanted it to do, very simple. And there's an awful lot of trial and error here to get the right prompting to make this work. So that's FlowWise. That's how the agent architecture worked. And we can go back to our thing, fingers crossed, and it did exactly what I wanted. So it just produced a new product description. So a couple of takeaways here. Making this thing sequence the way that we wanted was very difficult because the supervisor would take the input and infer that given the initial description and the reviews, it should do an evaluation of how well the initial description reflected the reviews, as opposed to do the generation first. So that's why you saw that I had to force it to do that generation step first. Oh, there's one other thing that I wanted to show you with the agents real quickly. This is the actual conversation when you do it interactively. And you can see, here's what's actually going on under the hood. So this was our original description, very long. The supervisor says, okay, I'm going to call the generation agent. Generation agent puts out this product specification I mentioned. It goes through the steps that were in the prompt. It comes up with a rating. It goes to the evaluation agent, and then it comes up with the final description. So that's just the output from the generator. The supervisor will say to the evaluation agent, you know, evaluate this thing. And so it went through, and this is where it does the tests for, here's the initial description, here's the new product description. How does it cover the product specification details? has some bullet points about that. What's the tone? Talks about that. And then it gives feedback to the generation agent and suggestions for the improvement. And then the supervisor says, okay, finalize this. And so it puts out the initial description, the product description, the coverage stuff. And now it's just repeating the information it got back. And finally, that's kind of the under the hood output. So yeah, back to my takeaways. It was very, I think, the previous speaker said, like, it was hard to like force this thing to do what you want. I spent quite a bit of time trial and error and nailing down the agents to really make them perform them what I want. The math was bad. Those averages that they came out were not good. So I think for the next, like, the way to improve this thing may be to do it just in one agent, which Amir had suggested in the past. As far as the control goes, another thing that we can do is actually do the math for the ratings during pre-processing, and then only feed a set number of the top reviews in to the LLMs to limit the number of tokens we're actually passing in. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Richard. On the math part, we've had a lot of success essentially chaining some prompts where in one of them you say, write Python code to calculate this, and then you execute the Python code. And then
I like that. Yeah.
It's a really simple trick that works really well.
Okay.
There are like some optimizations you can do on top of that, but that should significantly reduce the arithmetic hallucination. Same for calculating the scores in any other context. If you have numbers and you want to do any simple arithmetic, that's a very good way to do it. Cool. So you went into a lot of details, and I'm sure people will come to your room and talk to you. Maybe you can quickly say who do you want to talk to out of the audience? Are you taking this project forward? And maybe share a bit about that.
Yeah, so pretty much anybody who's been in this course, because we did use low code. So our team was great in the sense that it varied from people that are very technical to kind of non-technical. And so anybody that's interested about talking about flow-wise, its positives and negatives, and just, anybody that wants to ask more deeper engineering questions, that's fine. Flowise is built on top of LangGraph, which I have some understanding of. So
cool.
And then where it's going next, we're probably not going to, I don't know. I actually may do, in your next course, I may do a code version of this and see how, maybe I use LangGraph, I don't know, something that is easy to control. I spent way too much time like fighting with the agents, but anyhow.
Yeah, it is very likely actually that we use LangGraph for the next cohort. I'm getting more and more convinced that that's a really good framework. Although I'm excited about Llama agents too.